Okay, this is part 2 of Martin Luther quotes. We're kind of going from the quote book, but, the pictures aren't in the quote book. Anyways, so Martin Luther had started off the Protestant Reformation, like in 1517 with his 95 Theses on the wall, on the door at Wittenberg Cathedral. All right, but what I'm trying to say is it's a lot more than that. Martin Luther single-handedly destroyed the Renaissance. He brought the Renaissance to an end. Okay, the Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance, one of the most magnificent times ever in the history of mankind, destroyed by Luther and the Protestant jerks, okay? So Luther always put himself forth, well, I'm the friend, the protector of the peasants, okay? These poor peasants, they don't have a lot of money, and they'll give money to pay to the Catholic Church to buy indulgences, Somebody just gave, their 10 hard-earned dollar equivalents to buy indulgences for some dead relatives to get them out of purgatory. Okay, that's nice, Luther. You can view yourself that way, but look at the consequences. And he knew there was going to be trouble. As soon as Luther's message got out, there was a massive peasant revolt, and the princes brutally put them down. 150,000 German peasants killed. That's a lot of people. 150,000 German peasants. There weren't that many people in those days. That's a big, big percentage of all the German peasants in existence at that time. And it was spurred on by Luther's former colleagues, Karlstadt and Munzer. Again, they're all breaking apart. Right from the beginning, they can't agree on things. See, that's what I mean by I don't argue on Christian dogma because you don't get anywhere with it. The important thing is the message of Christ, how we're going to live this life on earth, and that we serve Christ, okay? And that's the good message, Be nice to each other, help each other, give each other the benefit of the doubt, love one another. Okay, that's all good. Follow the 10 Commandments. Instead of with the Protestant, it's all just kill each other. Anybody who doesn't agree with you about religion, kill each other. The Protestants are very, very violent compared to the Catholics. Luther was beholden to the princes in Germany because, like Frederick the Wise, was protecting him. If the princes didn't protect Luther, at that time, the Holy Roman Emperor, the Pope, would have had him killed too. So he had to maintain his allegiance if he wanted to live to the princes. But he didn't just maintain his allegiance. He sent out letters urging the German princes to just kill the peasants, okay? So he totally, stabbed the peasants in the back, okay? Not a very religious thing to do, not a very Christly thing to do. 150,000 German peasants killed in the German Civil War of 1524 and 25, okay? And then Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, marches into Rome and he sacks Rome. He lets these German Protestant soldiers go wild on Rome. So they're killing all the priests, they're raping all the younger nuns, killing the older nuns, brutalizing the place, devastating Rome. And Rome's, the most civilized, best place on earth, and they destroyed the place, okay? They killed 12,000 people. The Roman population rapidly dropped from 55,000 to 10,000, okay? And it was especially the German Lutheran troops that did this. This is a great painting by Javier Amerigo from 1884. And it's just awful. So they destroyed Rome. Okay, you freaking assholes. This is the most magnificent place in the whole world, the most civilized place in the whole world. And Luther caused it to be destroyed. And then Luther brags about this and he says, well, even though the Holy Roman Emperor doesn't like me, God is making him serve my cause by destroying, the devil Antichrist in Rome. Okay? So, what a destructive asshole. He's destroying Christendome, okay? The Muslims couldn't get into Rome and sack the place, but the Protestants could, and they did. And then Luther marries a nun, and I actually think it's good that priests should be married, okay? So I actually think that's one of the good things Luther did, that, the Lutherans, the priests can marry. So he got married, and he had a bunch of kids. And another thing that I like about Luther liked music. He even wrote a song, A Mighty Fortress is Our God. And he loved music, he loved women. I think that's a good thing. Okay? But there were some bad things. He said, the Protestants say you can't pray to a saint. Catholics pray to saints. They don't worship a saint. You don't worship a saint. You pray to them to ask them to intercede for you with God because you're scared to pray to God directly. What if he rejects you? Then you're screwed. if one saint fails, you can pray to another saint. Okay, you know, my mom prayed to the saints. She had a statue of St. Jude. She had other statues of saints. Padre Pio was a saint. She prayed to Padre Pio. She collected all this religious statues and stuff. That's how all the Puerto Rican Catholic ladies are. And they're the nicest people in the world, okay? My mother was a saint. She should be nominated for sainthood. She was on the board of directors of an orphanage. She adopted a bunch of children. She was a minister of care. She did tons of nice things for people all over the place. So look at all these ladies. You know, the Catholic Church is more supportive of women than just about any organization you'll find in the world. It welcomes them in to become nuns, to become saints, to run their own orphanages, to do all kinds of things. You look at the history of Catholic Church, you'll see one nun after another, one lady doing incredible things. And here's St. Elizabeth, you know, starting her own charity. There's tons of stuff like that, you know. Mary is the Queen of Heaven. Okay, how much more can you honor a woman than that? She's the Queen of Heaven. And the Catholics will pray to Mary, you know, to intercede for them, for their judgment, for their relative, for whatever problem they're having. And it's beautiful. Look at how beautiful this is. This is painted by William Bouguereau. It's magnificent. It's the most beautiful art ever made in the history of the world. Why wouldn't you want to respect and adore Mary, Queen of Heaven? Okay? And because this is a natural thing in humans. The feminine component of mankind and the masculine component of mankind. Okay? It's been that way since the beginning of humans on earth. It's normal. All this Protestant crap about just do as I say or I'll kick your ass and you won't go to heaven, you'll burn in hell forever if you don't do what I say. It's like, you know, sounds pretty tyrannical to me. Doesn't sound like the message of Christ. Okay, so here's another typical, you know, saint. This is St. Francis of Paola, you know, in comparison with St. Francis of Assisi, resuscitating a child. Catholic Church, it's all about life. They don't abort babies. They try to save them, okay? All right. And then there was the 7 sacraments of the church, including like marriage, for example, your first communion, and some other events in life. And Luther wanted to get rid of most of the sacraments, just keep baptism, for example, and communion. And it's like, you know, the Catholics gives people community. It gives them a way of life. Luther himself noticed, and Luther himself complained, why is it that the Protestants are so selfish and so nasty compared to the Catholics? Why is it that the Catholics are so much more charitable with their giving? Well, you know, like the book of James, you don't just go to heaven by saying you have faith in Christ. You also have to show it by how you live your life. And I went to a Catholic church, man. There was this giant community. Everybody knew each other. You knew all the families. You knew all the kids. They played on the sports teams. They went to church. You'd see all your friends in church. It was a great thing, the community. I miss that, okay? So anyways, Luther was breaking that apart too. All right, and there's tons of symbolism, artistic, religious, tons of it in Catholicism. So this is the Mystic Nativity, the painting by Sandro Botticelli. He's one of the artists who burned a few of his paintings in the craziness of Savonarola, who kind of foreshadowed the Protestant movement. Okay, so these are colors. I'm wearing this tie intentionally because I'm talking about Catholics and Protestants and Luther today, and these are the 3 colors. Faith is the white, okay? Hope is the green, like the resurrection, the green of spring. And red is love or charity. It's faith, hope, and love. Those are the colors of the Catholic Church. They're also the colors of the Italian flag. They're also the colors of Christmas. Okay, in this beautiful painting you can see faith, hope, and charity and love in the Mystic Nativity painting of the angels by Sandro Botticelli, 1500. Okay, now one thing I will give the Protestants credit for. The Protestants are, you know, Martin Luther said, sola fide, sola biblia, sola gratia. So everything by Scripture, sola scriptura, everything by the Bible. So what happened is the Protestants, because all they went by was the Bible, they were more motivated to learn how to read. Plus they translated the Bible like Luther did into German, vernacular German, so the common people that were literate could read it. Not that there were that many literate people. But what I will give credit to the Protestants, they're much more into reading the Bible, at least they were initially. Not anymore, but they were initially. And having more literate people, they generated a lot of good writers, like Charles Dickens in Protestant England. You know, magnificent book. The greatest novel of all time is Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Okay. You know, Bob Cratchit with Tiny Tim, and because Scrooge had repented and become a nice guy, Tiny Tim lives. Okay, it's beautiful. The movies are great. The Catholics, of course, though, were by far the best at building cathedrals. And the best cathedrals in terms of how they look outside were the French cathedrals. Here's Amiens Cathedral. I mean, you can't imagine a more magnificent, beautiful building than that. The greatest buildings ever made in the history of the world were made between about 1200 to 1600 by the Catholics, okay? You know, and then the Italians, I think, had the most beautiful cathedrals inside. They got that sense of decorating and combining the paintings with the sculpture. So here's a Chartres Cathedral in France. Look how beautiful that is. The high vaulted ceiling, like the canopy of the forest going up to God, inspiring awe. The beautiful painted stained glass windows. It's just magnificent. Here's Sainte-Chapelle. The Saint means holy. Chapelle, the chapel in France. Again, it's spectacular. It's sublime. It's magnificent. It's like you look at that and you can't imagine anything more beautiful than that. It's just, you know, it's like heaven on earth. It's so beautiful. I love cathedrals. I'll just show you a quote here by Augustus Welby Pugin. He was the English architect, Catholic architect in England in the mid 1800s, and he really had dreamed of a Catholic revival in England. But I just want to show you some of his quotes. He loved how the Catholics integrated the painting, the sculpture, the statuary. He said, "Gothic today, Gothic tomorrow, Gothic forever. Gothic is the only appropriate style for the building of a Catholic church. Everything glorious about English churches is Catholic. Everything debased and hideous is Protestant. Gothic is about light and color and beauty and splendor, with soaring lines that lift the human spirit heavenward. The heaven-pointing spire is a beautiful and instructive emblem of a Christian's brightest hopes. Since I was a child, I have prayed for the restoration of the long-lost glory of Catholic England." Okay, Augustus Welby Pugin, English architect, lived from 1812 to 1852. Okay, here's just another painting of Sandro Botticelli. So the Protestants wanted to get rid of all the paintings. They said, oh, we should not allow any painting. That's idolatry. That's idolatry. It's like, screw you, you pricks. This is magnificent. This is a celebration of the birth of Christ, of the Virgin Mary, the Holy Family, of Christians in general. It's magnificent. Art is beautiful. We all love art, okay? And, hundreds of years later, the Protestants started coming around, like with the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood in England, and great painters like John Everett Millais and Edmund Leighton and whatnot, Frederick Leighton and the others, okay? But, in the beginning, what a destructive mess it was. There's Sandro Botticelli painted himself into the painting. It's just beautiful. Here's just another typical example of a Renaissance painting from 1435, Descent from the Cross by Rogier van der Weyden. Him and Botticelli are the two best painters of the 1400s. And this one is funded by the Archers Guild. As you can see, they have the body of Christ as he comes down from the cross in the shape of a bow and arrow. And then Mary's posture as she faints, it echoes his. It's just beautiful. You can see Mary Magdalene, she's so sad, okay? The disciple John is so sad. The skull of Adam at the base of the cross, the new Adam, the new chance at life for mankind, okay? It's just magnificent, okay? This is what the Renaissance Catholic painters were doing in 1435, okay? The rest of the world was, still living in third world crap holes and teepees, okay? The Catholic Church created all this civilization, cathedrals, astronomy, magnificent painting, magnificent sculpture, the Word of Christ. Be nice to each other. Don't just be nice to your own family. Don't just be nice to your own group of people, your co-ethnics. Be nice to everybody. That's the only message that can unite the world. They're all created in the image of God. The brotherhood of mankind is dependent on the fatherhood of God. And if you don't accept the fatherhood of God, then you don't have a brotherhood of mankind. And then you have endless war, fighting, and slavery. That's not a good way for us to live, okay? It's pretty obvious. And look at these paintings. You're going to tell me this is idolatry to paint a painting? No, it's it's a celebration of Christ's creation. This is Among the Sierra Nevada Mountains by Albert Bierstadt. It's magnificent. It's sublime, okay? You see the hand of Christ in creating this, okay? All right, now here I'm just going to show you, and these are paintings by Germans, okay? This is painting by Albrecht Dürer. He was the greatest painter in Germany during the life of Luther. Adoration of the Church, of the Trinity at the altar. I'll show you the painting itself without the altar there. Here it is, it's just magnificent. The Trinity, of course, is, Christ, God the Father, and the Holy Spirit there, okay? And look at these paintings by Albrecht Dürer. Okay, there's Albrecht Dürer himself. There's a self-portrait of him when he was 26 years old, the magnificent artist. And he's proud. He knows he's a great artist. He's proud of it. And that's sort of the Renaissance, too. In the old cathedrals from the 1200s and 1300s, they didn't even sign their names to their statuary. But Albrecht Dürer, he says, look, I'm a damn good artist, one of the best artists in the world. Here's what I look like, and this is my painting, and he signs his name to it, as he should. He should be proud of it. These are the 7 Sorrows of Mary, okay? These paintings were very important to tell people the story of Christianity. How do you think they're going to learn? Most of them are illiterate. So they would see the paintings and somebody would maybe talk to them about it. And the priest would talk about it in the sermon. But that's how people learn. This is beautiful. What is wrong with these paintings? You're going to call this idolatry? You stupid backward Protestants, okay? They destroyed tons and tons of these beautiful paintings. Here's another, just the Feast of the Rosary by Albrecht Dürer, 1506. They're beautiful. I mean, what a noble thing to learn how to paint like this. And there he paints himself into the painting again. Okay? What a noble thing for children to learn how to paint. Okay, so here's like step one. When they built cathedrals, they would make them so boring. No statues, no paintings. I'm going to fall asleep. When I was a kid, I go to church with my parents. I would just sit around looking at all the stained glass windows, looking at all the statues, looking at all the paintings. I like that better than listening to the priest. I like the songs. I like the music. Okay, now here's iconoclasm. So iconography is like paintings and statues. And the Protestants would tear them down. They put a rope around the statues of the saints, the priests, the disciples. Here's one where they knocked the statue in half. And they destroyed the Catholic churches, okay? And like Bishop Barron had said, a movement has gone bad when it starts destroying beautiful things. Bishop Barron's a Catholic bishop. Okay, this is awful. Okay, and here's more of this iconoclasm, destroying the iconography, the statuary, the paintings. This is in Switzerland. So this happened, all the countries that became Protestant destroyed all this art. These destructive jerks. Like, you got tons of statues outside the Catholic churches. They would smash all these statues. Like primitive barbarians. Okay, here's, a church in France. The Calvinists got a hold of it, and this is in La Rochelle, France, and the Cathedral of St. Bartholomew, and they smashed all the statuary. What vandalism, destruction. These are the barbarians. These are the barbarians. This is not Christian behavior. This is barbarian behavior. You should call people barbarian. The cultures are not equal. Catholic culture is superior to Protestant barbarian culture that smashes paintings and smashes sculptures. And they went into Ireland, they took the Celtic crosses and they threw them into the sea. That's barbarian vandalism behavior, okay? This is Kenneth Clark from his movie series about civilization. It's a good movie series. I made a video about it. Here is England, okay? Now, I'm going to just tell you what a joke England Protestant church is. It's founded by Henry VIII. I think I got a painting of him coming up next, so I should have put it in better order. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is Henry VIII, was he married about 8 times, like his name? He bumped off half of his wives, so he's an adulterer, he's a mass murderer, and he's a thief. He stole the property from the Catholic Church because he wanted that for money, okay? So then this painting is sort of Elizabethan propaganda showing the dying Henry VIII, who had been part Catholic, so to speak, before they wouldn't grant him approval, like Thomas More. He killed Thomas More too for not approving his divorce. Anne Boleyn couldn't give him a male son. And so here is now the son, Edward VI, and he's a staunch Protestant. And in the background, there's a painting of, iconoclasm destroying Catholic statuary. And, Queen Elizabeth, when she took over, the Protestant Queen of England, like in the 1600s, she I think it was actually the late 1500s, she went into Ireland and she killed all the musicians, the bards, because she said, oh, we don't want them spreading Catholic culture. So she would just kill the musicians. That's how brutal they were. And here's the looting of the churches of Lyon in France. This is a painting by Antoine Caron, a French artist, in 1562. So they're just stealing all the stuff out of the churches to destroy it or sell it. These are the Calvinist Protestants. So the Protestants were incredibly destructive. Oh, here was the painting of Henry VIII. I should have shown this earlier. So look at this big fat slob, mass murderer, scumbag. That's the founder of the Anglican Church, okay? What a joke. What a joke. Okay, and what happens very often is secular rulers take over the Protestant churches and then they just use it for their own purposes. Okay, that's why the church should be separate from the ruling secular ruler, because the secular ruler is always going to be corrupt, Machiavellian, and do stuff they shouldn't do. So when the people see the church just serving the goals of some big jerk slob like Henry VIII, then the people lose respect for the church, okay? And that's how organized churches are, infiltrated by secular people and destroyed. Okay, here's just showing a little bit about the map of Protestantism. Lutheran took over in much of Germany, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and part of Prussia. Calvinists took over in Switzerland, parts of Germany, Scotland, Netherlands, and parts of France, for example. Like Scotland, then, you've got the Presbyterians, the Calvinists. Okay, so Christendome was broken apart. It's like a wife having a hissy fit and just breaking apart the whole family. And then when, the kids fall apart and everything goes to shit, she's like, well, I didn't mean that. Well, you dummy, you've seen what divorce does to other families. Why would you do that to your own family? Anyways, that's the end of part 2 on Luther.